Welcome to the Happy Wealthy Show. I am Neo Phalora, your host, and today we have Alex Peykoff. And I met Alex inadvertently, as I sometimes meet many great people, by something that they say. And you know the truth when you feel it in your body. And Alex is somebody who has made the money, who comes from a line of, and a family who've done incredible things in business. And so he has the chops to talk about this. But he started talking about our emotional debt. He started talking about not chasing money, but creating the life that you really want. And we hear this message over and over that really money isn't the answer. And we want to redefine wealth on this podcast, talk about it at a deeper level, get really deep with Alex today, who sometimes when we have people who are on the other side of doing these big things, they can provide us the most insight. And today's conversation, I promise you, is going to be volcanic if you're able to receive something and the gift of Alex's knowledge. Alex, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I hope I live up to those expectations. They sounded pretty awesome, but I think we can do it.
Yeah, I really believe that we can. So maybe not everybody has met you before, Alex. I don't like to give big, long intros. Give us 90 seconds of where you come from, what your story is.
Well, my story is pretty much like everybody else's, but I actually started paying attention to my life. So I grew up in a family business. So I was taught by one of the greater business minds of this century, my father, he created the Niagara Bottling Company. And so I was around him, and today it's one of the largest private held beverage companies in the world. And all it was really cool, and I learned so much about business. But the one thing I didn't learn about was emotion and being emotionally present. Because in business, those are kind of deterrents, right? You can't really feel, you can't be emotional because that doesn't keep you on that path of going straight. So there's a lot of great things I learned on that journey. And during that journey, I had all the nice things that money could buy, but inside I was emotionally bankrupt, right? So there's all these lavish things you can get when you work really hard and you're making money. In my life, things started changing on December 7th, 1999. My daughter was born, and I realized I need to start looking at things differently, right? And then 10 years ago on Memorial Day weekend, there was kind of trauma hit our house, right? And something happened to my daughter. And during that time, I thought I was present, right? I was focusing so much on the next business deal or again, making money, but I wasn't physically present, nor was I emotionally present. So at that time, I kind of said, look, I call it D-Day. It was decision day. What am I going to do with my life to change and actually be present? So from that day forward, I realized I'm going to quit trying to acquire these monetary things. And what if I find this thing called wealth, which to me was creating memories and being present for everybody. And when that happened several years ago, I decided to write a book about that journey. And it was called Get Your Satisfaction, A Short Guide to a Happier, More Satisfied Life. It became a Wall Street Journal best-selling book. And it was quite fascinating. But what was more important is the reviews. I was impacting people's lives. And from there, I said, hey, I thought what I knew, people knew. And the more I shared with it, people were like, oh. So I was kind of giving them that permission slip and showing them my journey from going from stressed to stressless. And that's where we are today. And I've got a second book coming out. But my whole life was really about being present and staying to your truth and trying to focus on wealth and quiet wealth.
Wow. And you said going from stress to, what was the word?
Stressless.
Stressless.
You know,
I like that. I like that. And this is obviously the namesake of the show. I'm really super excited to talk to you today because I do want to redefine wealth. And in my version of wealth, wealth is impact, it's fulfillment, it's relationships, and it's revenue. But I think the thing is that so many people define wealth as just the revenue. But what I say to people often is like, that's just the optics, right? It's the optics of people lean into, hey, I want to buy this thing so I can look rich, I can feel rich, and getting out of the optics. And I know for some people, we start to lose them immediately, Alex, because they're like, well, you just want to feel good. How is that wealthy? Can you dive a little deeper and explain to us, what do you mean by living truly wealthy?
Well, it's different. I had to figure that out over time, right? Because I didn't know, right? Society tells us what wealth is, right? Society also tells us what success is, but that's not how it should be. You should determine what wealth is to you, right? For me, wealth is being happy, being content, creating memories. The amount of memories I have in my head, I have a little Blockbuster video store here. Those memories, there is no amount of money that can buy those. That's wealth. Wealth is something you can take with you and you can pass it on. Wealth you can share. Wealth you can teach. Money doesn't teach. Money's not going to sit there and say, look, by the way, I think I'm going to be a movie producer. So I've got all this money and I'm going to be a movie producer. No, money doesn't do that. Money doesn't make you a great husband. Money doesn't make you a great mom. Wealth does. Wealth is about you being present and being true to yourself. Wealth comes from within and reflecting and taking time to what makes you feel good, not what society's telling what feels good, what makes you feel good. The problem is everybody's chasing money or these riches. No one's chasing wealth. And here's the funny thing, you don't have to chase wealth, because the fact of the matter is when you have gratitude, you're surrounded by wealth, right? Friendship is wealth. Memories is wealth. The morning I get up and I walk on the beach, it was wealth. I was connecting with nature. There's no money that's going to do that. I had to be physically present and shut down the noise. Nothing mattered. That is wealth. Wealth is not something you're going to go pick off the shelf at pavilions or Publix. Wealth is about looking at your life and saying, man, I'm so thankful. I'm so grateful. And with wealth comes this thing called respect. You have to respect yourself and respect others. People seem to think that money buys you respect. It doesn't. You know what money does? It highlights your weaknesses. Wealth doesn't do that. Wealth accents your level of contentness.
Yeah, that's so good, and there's definitely a lot of things to rewind and listen to. Not the least of which is that I say to people, it's like wealth is earned, but it owes you nothing. The real privilege, people talk about the privilege. The real privilege is to experience abundance, and that can be experienced at any level of revenue, and it also can be massively absent at any level of revenue as well. So people don't understand that they just leaning into a dollar figure doesn't create abundance in your life, not even in the least bit. um, I also would love to talk about like this idea of like becoming, like you talk about this idea of debt and emotional debt. And one of the things that I do in my masterminds is I talk about these two versions of debt, two stages of debt relief. And one of them I call it developing empowerment beyond trauma. And then the second part about that is driving earnings by trust, by trusting. And I'd love to hear more about what you have to say when it comes to this emotional debt, because there again, we're talking about these guys because just because you get money doesn't mean that your life suddenly becomes absolved of any hardships. And I loved what Alex said there. I hope you heard that, is that having more money isn't the root of all evil. What it does is that when you don't do the work and you try to put money ahead of the work, it will absolutely enhance your weaknesses, your challenge, your problems. It'll give you unfair focus on all those things and saying, look, you tried to solve your problems by gaming the system, and guess what? You can't do that.
Now, I agree with you 100%. It's fascinating. I love this dialogue. So, the person I am today isn't who I was 10 years ago, right? I mean, physically, they look the same, but I was completely freaking miserable. I mean, miserable. I was like the majority of people on the planet. Monday comes around, I said, oh my God, I hate Monday. I couldn't get out of my bed. So, going through this journey, the good thing was that I did have money, so I could hire the experts. So when my daughter struggled, I reached out to the people at Johns Hopkins, reached out to all these experts, and they started, there's this thing called emotional debt. You need to understand what that is. So I was able to access all these tools. I eventually created a website called emotionallydebtfree.com. There's a test on there that gives you your starting point of where you're emotionally imbalanced, right? Because here's how it works. There is no universal tool to solve your emotional debt. But in anywhere in life, when you get up this morning, you look on your phone and you have a GPS and you find your starting point, right? So you have to have a starting point. So what I've designed is that now you have a starting point, right? So you can sit there, you have this, you have this. No, 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 no. Where are you today? So once you find out where you are today, you can start figuring out what that emotional debt. For me, my emotional debt, it was supposedly my Achilles, but it was my strength, right? So some of that emotional debt was, again, someone telling me something that wasn't my truth, and maybe it was their agenda. It wasn't an intentional agenda. It was not an unconditional agenda, right? And so that's okay. So I had to go back to figure out what made me feel good. So when I talk so much about emotional debt, when you're a little kid, you touch that hot oven one time, right? Because you're emotionally debt free. When you get older, you touch that hot oven 20, 30 times. And what I mean by that is the toxicity of situations we're in, right? So go back and figure out that truth again. So I tell people all the time, focus on emotional debt, give yourself a permission slip, and knock out that to-do crap, but find out what you want to be. And to find out what you want to be, you've got to dig inside in that emotion and tell yourself the truth. So again, to clarify, I was very emotional when I was younger. Very cried a lot. I was still this big guy, but I wasn't balancing my masculine and feminine. Okay, it was more like I wanted to be sensitive. I wanted to care, right? When my daughter was born, I learned to balance the two of them. But in the business world, like we said earlier, emotion wasn't being emotionally vulnerable wasn't a strength. I found out today, as I've been impacting thousands and thousands of people all over the world, my emotional so-called Achilles is my freaking superpower.
Yes, brother, this is why we vibrate similarly. And I'll just say this, like, hot take, but once upon a time, I ran a business within an 80,000 person company. It was a custom business. We won't go into all that here, but that is to say, I had a lot of opportunity to be at C-suite level in boardrooms. I'll just tell you, as God is my witness, we would always start out with like, we're going to make this decision logically. We're going to do this rubric. We're going to do the SWOT analysis. But then, Alex, three-fourths of every fucking meeting was, how's the customer going to feel? How's the marketing going to feel? Did you know that you can't sell to somebody in even keel? You need to either get them in trouble or growth mode. And there was always this rejection of feeling. But yet we know in our world that people buy on feeling and they justify with logic. And that I have said to other people, I'm like, well, if you think that all life is all logic based, tell me when you reach your goal how logic is going to help you experience your kitty. And this is what happens. I know that you know this because you run in those circles with people who have extreme wealth. But I have friends who do these payouts, these cash outs, and they tell me half the time it's a grief or it's a mindset or a grief meeting because they've done something for fucking 25 years and then they woke up one day and they sacrificed their regrets of the dying, their time, their mental health, their physical health, their relationships, and they have no identification, no practice of being happiness. And so now what do? They're Tom Brady. You can't be in the field and win another Super Bowl ring. You don't know who you are.
Yeah, it's interesting because the society has programmed us where we don't know who we are, right? Like I help a lot of young kids out and they have all these options, but they don't know what lane to go in, right? And they forget. And I tell people this all the time, do what feels good. If it doesn't feel good, don't do it. It's not all of a sudden going to start feeling better. You know it doesn't feel good. And there's this famous saying, it's called purposeful prosperity. Follow your passion, right? If you're trying to sit there and be the strongest guy in the boardroom, I feel sorry for you. Because here's your problem. You don't know how to listen and you don't know how to reflect, right? And you're dead inside. And it's okay. I was dead inside once before, but I'm telling you, that's a really sad life. And I guarantee you, those people that are dynamic, they're unhappy. They have broken relationships. They're struggling. But the people that are most content, if you look at couples that have been married for a long time, I tell you the one thing they have in common, they're happy and they laugh and they're present, right? They're not trying to climb Mount Everest every day. You know, it's okay climbing Bunker Hill. I mean, I'm being sarcastic, right? But just live in the moment. I'm telling you, this whole thing where we're racing, it doesn't work. But the problem is, turn out the outside noise. Quit listening to what society's telling you. Do what makes you feel good. I guarantee you it's okay, right? Just slow down. It is not a race. Life is not a race, right? I'm going to be 60 in December. I can see the end finish line right now. It's good and it's bad. So every moment, enjoy life and take time to acknowledge your wins, not your future wins, but your present wins and what you've done and who you've impacted in this world, because that's all that matters. When we die, it doesn't matter how much money you have. It matters whose life you changed. And when you get text messages from kids saying, hey man, thank you for helping me get in college, and the parents saying, thank you, and you did that and it cost you $0, that's called unconditionality. And the only way you can do that is when you are emotionally present.
Beautiful, wonderful. You know, you talk about this idea that in my own framework, I tell people that we start down in stuck, fear, scarcity, and we get to hustle. And in our society, we call that successful. And I call bullshit. That's not successful. It's getting to alignment and then finding action, getting to alignment and finding action. And somewhere in there, you'll start to develop your intuition. But people leave out the alignment piece. It's just grind yourself into a pulp. And that's not really success. And you get to authenticity. And for me, that is an absolute version of wealth. And I love the idea of being, I think you said purposeful prosperity. That is such a cool lingo. But I want to play a little devil's advocate because I know some people, if they look you up right now, they look you up and they're like, well, this is the biggest bottling agency in the world. This guy has money. It's easy for him to say. It's easy for him to talk about happiness and wealth because he has the ability and access to things. And I know you have an answer for this because probably some people have said that to you. But what's the real scoop here
So
when people say
here's
that
the
to you?
real scoop: is don't judge a book by its cover. And I'll go into detail a little bit more about that. I haven't been involved in their family business for years, right? But I know about it. I know the legacy it's created. I know how it's impacted tons of people around the world. I know how it's changed the environmental footprint. I know how much it's give back, the big family dynamic. So it's really easy, but let me tell you my life, okay? I had all this money. I was living in one of the most affluent locations in the world, Emerald Bay and Laguna Beach. Somehow, my daughter had some crap happen to her, right? I don't care if you had $1 or if you had $10 million, crap still happens. I've had friends die that had lots of monetary stuff. People that don't have monetary stuff have that same stuff. I've had a brother who has a mental disease. He's been struggling with it since he was a kid. He's now 60 plus years. I've had my share of heartache. I went to custody over my daughter when she was 2 weeks old up until the time she was 16, going to court all the time, being accused of all these horrible things. So yeah, people like that, I say, why don't you look in the mirror? It's so easy to judge others until you've walked in my shoes. The money is one thing, but I have pain in my heart and heartache just like everybody else. I've seen my daughter, have horrible things happen to her and couldn't fix it. There was no amount of money that could fix it. But what would have fixed it? If I was present, emotionally present, right? But I was so consumed with, going back to your word, success. I was so consumed what society was telling me was successful, and I quit focusing on satisfaction. And what I mean by that is satisfaction you determine, right? So a lot of times, quit being so shallow and looking at somebody from the outside. We all have turmoil. We've all had people that have dealt with cancer, have lost loved ones, right? But the fact of the matter, it's so much easier to point the finger at somebody else instead of pointing your finger at yourself and telling yourself the truth. Hey, if your life sucks, it's going to suck whether you have $1 or $100 million or $5 million. The bottom line is you have to make the choice and stop comparing. When you compare, you're not going to grow. So you can compare yourself to Alex Peykoff on the surface, but why don't you compare yourself to his inside? And I'll compare. And then let's stop comparing and let's start connecting, having real conversations about real, genuine things. And we might actually have a friendship and a connection, because in today's society, 57% of the people are lonely in this world. We want connection. Stop comparing. Just ask a question. Ask a question and share. Be open-minded. And after you ask that question, reflect. It's okay to reflect and tell somebody, I hear you. Don't go fixing crap.
A little bit of tough love moment for everybody here, but we're okay leaning into those here on the podcast. And really, what we're saying, guys, at the end of the day, we need to drop the illusion that money can buy back time. It can buy back relationships. It can buy back heartache. It can buy back the fact that you haven't taken care of your health or that you are ill. It can't do those things. It really is limited. Really, it's like what I tell people about systems all the time, Alex. Systems only work if you do. And I really believe that fundamentally about money becomes wealth when you work and you've done the work, right? And you do the work constantly, then money can work for you. But money doesn't work for you if you don't do the work. And that's the thing that people have confused here, is that they're looking for money to be the panacea or the savior in this case for all the things that they have going on in their life, the heartache, the pain, the things that no amount of money. Sure, supposedly you can buy a more time with your therapist, but guess what? Going to your therapist, if you don't do the work, even if they charge $1,000 an hour, isn't going to fucking do anything.
No, I agree with you 100%. It's interesting because I'm listening to you talk and it all resonates with me, right? But one thing kept on popping in my head, and it's called regrets, right? And you can have regrets whether you have money or you don't have money. But the one thing that's going to kick your ass in this life or kick your butt in this life is regrets, right? So if you feel like doing something or feel like saying something, I guarantee you just say it. Because again, money, you said this, money's not going to buy you more time, and money's not going to let you go back in time. So if you feel something and you want to do it, just do it. There's no loss to it, right? But that regrets and that indecision of not doing something is part of that thing of that emotional debt, right? You also mentioned something earlier about fear. We're afraid. Here's the fascinating with fear, and I love how society's made fear so powerful. Fear isn't real. It is just something that people point to, but it's not real. There's not a boogeyman under my bed. There's not a guy standing outside my door with a big knife, right? It's fear. And that fear is stuff we're telling ourselves is going to happen if we do this. What if you just do it and see, right? Are you going to fall on your face? It's okay. Fail forward. But that fear makes us where we quit and we become frozen in fear. There's no forward progress.
This is such a big topic with entrepreneurs, with business people, people just in their lives. It's like, how do we really address fear? And it does feel very real. And I think the reason that feels real to a lot of people is they don't understand that fear is a biochemical emotion, but the story starts in our head, and the history gets written in our body. We store those emotions, those things that happen to us over time, and then we start to believe every thought and feeling that we think. But one of the things that I did as a flip is that I started understanding that limiting beliefs aren't really limiting; they're protecting. And I started asking fear, "What do you want me to know? Why are you here? What are you trying to protect me from?" And as I started to develop a relationship, instead of just doing the traditional alpha male, like fuck fear, playing small is canceled, just screw it, which actually doesn't work, is I want to bring in these parts of me that are valid parts of me. If I have fear, it's a valid part of me, but I address it, have a different relationship with it, and then I jump off the cliff with it, as opposed to just leaving at the doorstep. Because anything that you just try to leave, it's like a child waiting on your doorstep. They're just going to be waiting when you get back home. And you really don't, these things in life, I just did a post about this today on Facebook, they don't ever resolve. People say, oh, I left that in the past, I'm over that. I'm not saying you need to be a wound. You just need to learn how to have a different relationship with it. It doesn't really go away, and it will keep coming back to teach you something new in every season of life. That's the
No,
truth.
it's funny. I was laughing because it cracks me up because people say, "Oh, I'll just push it over here. I'll just push it over here." It doesn't work that way, right? When you try to tell yourself not to think about something, there is so much scientific data out there. It doesn't work. But if you reframe it or redirect it, right? Like I go back to this Blockbuster video store for the younger generation on the Netflix, right? I go back in there and maybe I have fear, but I'll go in there and say, you know what? No, that's not true. And there's all these videos that tell you the truth, right? And you have to learn from them. But there is no truth to fear, right? We give it so much power. Here's the crazy thing: what if you started giving some positivity power, right? Like, oh my gosh, if I do this, I'm going to have so much abundance that I'm so worried. What am I going to do? I might be able to help illiteracy. I might be able to help homeless. I might help teen rape, teen suicide. Oh my gosh, that's going to be terrible. I'm so afraid to sit there and impact the world, right? I'm being sarcastic, right? But turn it into something positive instead of something negative. Society's programmed us into negativity, you know? And here's what I say: when you're focused so much on negativity, ask yourself this question: how's it working for you? How's it, how's it working for you? Simple question: how's it working for you? I guarantee you it's not working for you. So quit doing it. But the hardest thing to do is change. But once you start doing it, it's easier, right? We've all been through journeys, right? You've had a career change in your life. The hardest thing was, man, I'm gonna do this. But then once you did it, oh my gosh, this kind of feels good, right? And you started forming a new pattern, but it was a healthy pattern. Life's not complicated. Stop overthinking it. You know, quit saying. I'll leave on this subject. We set these high goals out there. Focus on what you're trying to be. Once you find out what you're trying to be, all those goals, all those things, they fall into places. But you can't have a to-do list unless you know what you want to be. And I start with something simple. You know what I want to be today? I want to be happy. I want to be present. Then everything else falls into place. I think I want to wake up alive today. These are simple things, and I'm being sarcastic, but we put these high bars out there. Look at the simple stuff. And so many people in this world don't have the simple things that we forget about. Just be grateful, and I swear to you, your life will change dramatically.
being who we're being is everything, and that's why business gets complicated or weird or feels slimy, is because we focus on trying to get something rather than who we're being. And it is that painfully simple. It is that painfully simple to say, you know what, this is exactly what do in my own life, is focusing my attention and intention. Once I know what my intention is, it can be as simple as writing 3 to 5 words down, right, that you want to embody in a meeting. I bought my houses that way. I bought my cars that way. I found my next jobs that way. I'm not perfect. I've not always done this. I don't always live in that. But you're exactly right. It's like, because why is do I know this works? And I'll flip the whole equation for everybody, because that's exactly what marketing is. Marketing is giving you the experience of who you're going to be when you purchase a product, have a service, take a vacation. So they already know that this works. So why wouldn't we use what we know that works in all our brains and flip that equation and put ourselves ahead of the marketing? I tell people all the time, like who I coach in small businesses, mediums, I'm like, your internal marketing needs to be stronger than your external marketing. That's it, And when you are that grounded in your own internal marketing, it all works. It works so much better. You can talk to your customers. You can enroll people in a vision because your internal marketing is working.
It's interesting. We talked about this a little bit before. When I did that event in the Abundance Overflow in Nashville, we put something in a chair and it was a permission slip. And I gave everybody a permission slip to be. And that's kind of that starting point where now you have that idea of what I want to be, but you have to give yourself permission slip to feel, permission slip to be alive, instead of that permission slip which is telling you all these things you can't be. When you're a little kid in school, the first day in preschool, what do they tell you? They tell you, what do you want to do? They ask you, what do you want to be? Right? So I keep on focusing back that time. And we can go back in time in our mind, but you can make yourself a child again where you were embracing and you're receptive to everything out there. That's what I try to explain to people. Give yourself that permission slip to go back to when you did feel good. When's the last time you felt good? And go back to that and start seeing what's changed, right? You and I can wake up, we can feel great, we'll go out and have an experience, we'll come home, we don't reflect on what changed, what did I do differently, right? And sometimes we're running into people that are telling us, what are you doing? Why are you so happy? Or they're energy vampires. Keep remember what makes you feel good. And like I said, we talked about therapists, all the money in the world can pay therapists. The bottom line is you actually have the answers in yourself, but you need to shut down that noise and remember what felt good. There is information overload in the mental space, but the whole thing is take a time out, go back to when you felt good. It's okay to be alone, but you can't be alone unless you've addressed your emotional debt and find out what feels good.
Yeah, absolutely. And this reminds me of that principle of ikigai, right? It's like, do what you love, what are you good at, what the world needs, and then what can you be paid for? And it's finding that intersection of all those things. Because if you don't love what you do, your vocation will never turn into a vacation. And that's where most people are at. And that's why 9 to 5 mentality is still so pervasive, even in the entrepreneur community. I used to live that as well. Dude, I left the multi six figure job and the multi six figure bonus and the golden handcuffs to be my own boss. And I'm like, Alex, I'm the worst fucking boss in the world. I've never done enough. I can't take vacation. I never get rewarded for anything I do accomplish. And then whatever I do accomplish, it's gone in like 30 seconds. It seems to make no difference. And we need to make that move. You need to make that move to doing what you absolutely love. I'm even doing that presently in my business. I'm living this work. I'm giving this talk in Nashville soon, and I'm writing it. And I've had to start it over 4 times. You know why? Because I'm leaning into let me teach what I think looks good, and I need to teach this framework. And finally today, I made a post and over some of the things, and for me, I had a lot of respondents. I don't care about the number, but I could tell people really felt it because I was leaning into this idea of going big, of living what I know I'm here to do and how I'm here to serve, and not worrying about the fucking optics anymore. And that will create more revenue for me in my life than being a shyster, a charlatan, living in half truths, right? Trying to game the system all the time.
Yeah, it's interesting that you said so much, and so I kind of just want to pick out pieces of it. But you talked about accomplishments earlier, and I was in that same canoe or the same boat. And what I found out, I'd get these accomplishments, but they weren't my accomplishments. I mean, I was doing them, but they were the tiers that society was telling you. So of course you'd be there, and you're like, wait, what if I started doing something that was for me? So I started doing this stuff. I want to say it was 8 years ago, and I started walking down the street and smiling at people, and it was really weird, but I was changing their lives because the flip of it, people were smiling at me, and I go, oh my god, this is kind of cool, right? So that was a huge accomplishment, and it was unconditional. And I started doing that more and more, and just acknowledging people, and it was really cool. And it's interesting. You talked about the shysters and the scammers, and in this space, there are a lot of them, right? And it's really, really unfortunate. But there are people that get it, right? That are doing it unconditionally. And in this world, we go back to, we were talking about wealth and money. A lot of these people in this space, they are chasing things, right? But if you really have your life where you want it, you do this because it feels good, right? You're struggling writing your keynote, right? You're struggling because you're empathetic and you care, right? If you were one of those shysters out there, you wouldn't care. You would just say, here's what they want to hear. I'm going to 10x their money. I'm going to get all this type of stuff, right? But you know deep inside, you've been in their chair, and that's not what you want to hear. So you're struggling because you want to make sure you're saying what they want to hear, what they came for, right? So that's where you and I are wired differently. We're not the Grant Cardone douchebags out there and all those other whatever word we want to use. Can you edit this out, right? But we're actually doing it because we care, right? And I'll say one last thing on this thing. You talked about love, right? And I was with Garrett White a year ago, and he goes, "Oh, what are you doing?" So I'm going to help you with passion and love. He goes, that's not going to work, right? I go, what do you mean it's not going to work? He goes, well, you're not going to make money off passion. Then he had me rattled for a while. And I go, maybe you're not at first, but you're going to go down your passion lane, but it's eventually going to lead you to something, right? So the purpose, there was a plan.
Absolutely that. And if you're listening to this podcast and you're like, you know what, I don't know what I love, I don't know what I want, what I do, like I'm stuck in a job that pays me enough. I tell clients all the time, one of the most dangerous salary positions is between $80,000 and $150,000 a year, because you bought yourself into a life, right? Where you have some things, you have some nice things, it's a respectable income. I'm not disparaging it in any way, but you can't transition. Often those people can't transition into what their real purpose in their life. But what I would say to people is that find the people that are closest to you, even if if they're your customers, great, or family members, people that you cherish, right? People who cherish you, and ask them, why do you love me? Why am I great? Why do you continue to have a relationship with me? Why have we been friends all these years? You start to discover outside of your own inner critic, like, wow, this is how I'm showing up for people. This is what people say about me. This is how people feel about me. This is how people are thinking about me, and I have no awareness. Because I'll just tell you this, Alex, you got me fired up. When I was in that business development job, I didn't care. I was good at sales. I didn't care about that job. What I cared about is changing the CEO's life who has a toxic work environment, talking to a guy in an airport, crying with a lady on an airplane who invited me back to meet with her son, riding around in a taxi cab with a Uganda guy for 2 hours, and him, the 7-foot guy, picking me up like a rag doll and hugging me and saying, thank you for being in my life right now. Those are the things that really, really fired me up and really let me know that I'm here to make a difference. And I think so many people forget that you will never feel wealth until you understand why you matter and you understand how you matter in other people's lives. And everybody's had this moment in life where somebody said 5 to 10 words and it has stayed with you the rest of your life. So if you don't think that you have a Schindler's List of people out there who are fucking waiting for you to show up, they are, because other people have changed your life in that way as well.
I love that, and it's interesting. It's interesting how the world works, right? We connected on just some strange way, right? But what you said, I don't have the words to articulate right now. I can't tell you how many times, and I want to tear up here, how many times I've just talked to complete strangers, because I could and I was present, and they act like you just saved their life, and we all have the ability to do that, but we get so caught up with these toxic people, we forget that we all have this beautiful energy inside ourselves. Just let it out. But we've been pushed down. A good friend of mine, Tim Story, he says, we go through life and we get the shout knocked out of us, right? But here you are, that 7 foot man. I've had experience like that my whole life, and it's just like, it's amazing that, and no one can take it away. And I have so many videos in my head where just helping people, and you could, but they didn't think that you cared. They didn't think. And so I look back, and we were focused on gratitude a little earlier, and man, look at how grateful we are. And I tell people, look, every day in the week, just for 1 week, write down what you're grateful for on Monday, Tuesday. Then go back and look at it and tell me how crappy your life is after that. It's not. It's so beautiful. And I'm gonna digress for a second. I want to share this with you because this is from my daughter, and I want the audience to hear this because this is what's about when you're present. She wrote this in 2019. Dad, I really appreciate all that you've done for me the past 20 years, everything that you do and continue to do. I am so grateful to have you as my dad and to learn from all the lessons you taught me. The biggest thing I've learned is to never give up. You never let obstacles get in the way of doing what you want or need to do. And I admire that. I love you very much and know you would do anything for me. But it's the obstacles, right? We put obstacles in people's lives. So here's a young kid that gets it. But when we're older, how come we don't see that, right? We let all these obstacles. If you see somebody hurting on the street, you see somebody crying, right? Come up to them and tell them, just give them a hug. Don't try to fix them. Just listen to them and be present. I swear to you, I don't have to, okay, I'm 6 feet, you'll be 6'4", right? It is amazing. And it's free. You were trying to change that guy at work, right? He's never going to hear you, but you tried, right? And you could have taken that energy and helped that 7-foot guy or these other people. That's the beauty that everybody in the audience, we all have that ability, but you have to take your head out of your butt and tell yourself the truth. Yeah.
Yeah. And maybe that's a good place to end the conversation here as we wrap up our time. And what I really appreciate about you, Alex, is like, if you guys are not watching on the video, for these listening right now, is that this man is very overwhelmed with emotion in the moment because he gets the precious, like, we don't understand how essential our existence is here. It's very essential. Self-worth cannot be created or destroyed. It is completely inherent. And Alex, you typify that. As we bring these things to close, I'd like to ask you the question that I like to ask most of my listeners or most of my guests rather, when we end the show up, is like, if you could go back, to 17-year-old Alex and you had about 90 seconds to tell him something, what would you tell him?
And I don't want to cry because you already got me all sensitive again. I would just stick. What felt good, I would have stuck with it. I would have realized that not everybody's doing things unconditionally in their life. They all have their agenda. Stick to your agenda. And the last thing I would say, do not hurt Alex. It's that simple. Life's not complicated, but we make it complicated. If it feels good, do it. And you know what's best for you.
That's beautiful. The storm happens to us, and unfortunately, then we become the storm. So I know you're doing a lot of things. You're getting your message out there, brother. I reverberate it. That's why I just was in just a purely in a contributing fashion. I wanted to amplify you, right? Not asking for anything else in return. And I know that you are really a giver. You're getting your message out there. If somebody wants to know more about you, maybe somebody wants you to come in and speak at one of their events, how do they get in touch with you if they want to know
The
more?
best way is just go to alexpeykoff.com. In there, there's all my contact information. If that doesn't work, you can just DM me directly. The quickest response is just to DM me on Instagram. But if you go into alexpeykoff.com, all my information is in there. It's more of a story because just what Neil and I talked about, this is the touch of the thing, but there's more of my journey. Again, just reach out to me. I'm an open book, and I encourage everybody, just ask. You're going to have regrets. If you feel like reaching out to me, reach out. If you feel like reaching out to Neil, reach out. You got to reach out. Do it today. Do it today. Do it today.
Well said, brother. Well said. Well, thank you, Alex, for being on the show. And for all of you that are listening, remember that the best part of being wealthy is being happy.
Appreciate it. Thank you so much. Thanks for making me cry.